My name is Dr. Maria Gonzalez, and I have been working as a pediatrician at Children's Hospital Philadelphia for 12 years. In that time, I have delivered thousands of babies and watched countless families celebrate the arrival of new life. But I had never encountered a case that would shake my faith in human honesty quite like the birth of Emma and Ethan Williams. Sarah Williams was 32 years old, married to David Williams for 8 years. And this was their first pregnancy after struggling with infertility for years. They had undergone multiple rounds of fertility treatments, and when Sarah finally became pregnant with twins, they were overjoyed. Throughout the pregnancy, Sarah and David were model patients. They attended every appointment together, asked thoughtful questions, and clearly adored each other. David was one of the most attentive expectant fathers I had ever worked with. He took notes during appointments, researched everything about twin pregnancies, and was constantly doting on Sarah. "Dr. Gonzalez," David said during one of their appointments, "we have waited so long for this moment. These babies are going to be so loved." Sarah smiled and squeezed his hand. David has been reading pregnancy books since the day we found out. He probably knows more about twin development than I do. They seemed like the perfect couple, deeply in love, financially stable, and desperately wanting to become parents. David worked as a software engineer for a major tech company, and Sarah was a high school English teacher. They had bought a house in a good neighborhood, decorated a beautiful nursery, and had strong support from both their families. The pregnancy progressed normally until Sarah went into labor at 37 weeks, which is typical for twins. David was by her side throughout the delivery, holding her hand, encouraging her, and crying tears of joy when both babies were born healthy. Emma was born first, weighing 5 pounds and 2 ounces, with dark hair and brown eyes. Ethan followed 3 minutes later, weighing 5 pounds and 6 ounces, with blonde hair and blue eyes. "They are perfect," David whispered as he held both babies for the first time. Absolutely perfect. But as a pediatrician, I noticed something unusual about the twins that I needed to investigate further. While it is not uncommon for fraternal twins to look different from each other, Emma and Ethan showed physical characteristics that seemed inconsistent with having the same biological parents. Emma had olive-toned skin, dark hair, and brown eyes that were very similar to Sarah's features. But Ethan had fair skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes that did not match either Sarah or David's appearance. Both Sarah and David had dark hair and brown eyes, which made Ethan's coloring genetically unusual. "Sarah, David," I said as we completed the newborn examinations, "the babies are both healthy and beautiful. However, I would like to run some routine genetic tests to check for any hereditary conditions." This was standard practice, and neither Sarah nor David seemed concerned. "Of course, Dr. Gonzalez," Sarah said. "Whatever you think is necessary for their health. The genetic tests would take several days to process, and I expected them to come back showing normal results for fraternal twins. What I did not expect was for the results to reveal something that would destroy what appeared to be a loving marriage." 3 days later, the genetic test results arrived, and I had to read them twice to make sure I was understanding correctly. Emma's DNA showed that David Williams was indeed her biological father. But Ethan's DNA indicated that David was not his biological father. This meant that Sarah had somehow conceived twins with 2 different men, a rare phenomenon called heteropaternal superfecundation. It occurs when a woman releases multiple eggs during ovulation and has sexual intercourse with different partners within a short time frame. I sat in my office staring at the test results, trying to figure out how to handle this delicate situation. Sarah and David seemed genuinely happy and in love, and they had been trying to conceive for years. But the genetic evidence was undeniable. One of their twins was not David's biological child. I called Sarah and asked her to come in to discuss the test results, without specifying what we needed to talk about. When she arrived at my office the next day, she looked happy and relaxed, still glowing from the joy of finally becoming a mother. "Dr. Gonzalez, how are Emma and Ethan doing?" Sarah asked. "The genetic tests did not show any problems, did they?" I looked at this woman who seemed so genuinely content with her new family, and I realized I was about to deliver news that could destroy her marriage and her happiness. "Sarah, the babies are both perfectly healthy," I began carefully. But the genetic tests revealed something unexpected that we need to discuss. Sarah's expression became concerned. What kind of unexpected? I took a deep breath and delivered the news as gently as I could. Sarah, the tests show that while Emma is David's biological daughter, Ethan has a different biological father. Sarah's face went completely pale, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. She sat in silence for nearly a full minute before speaking. "That is impossible," she whispered. "Dr. Gonzalez, David is the only man I have been with. We have been trying to get pregnant for years." There is no way Ethan could have a different father, but even as she said it, I could see in her eyes that she was already remembering something that contradicted her denial. Sarah sat in my office chair, staring at the genetic test results with tears starting to form in her eyes. I could see her mind racing, trying to process how this could have happened. "Dr. Gonzalez," she said quietly, "are you absolutely certain about these results? Could there have been some kind of mistake?" "Sarah, I had the tests run twice by 2 different laboratories to be completely sure," I replied gently. "The results are definitive. Emma and Ethan are fraternal twins, but they have different biological fathers." Sarah put her face in her hands and began to cry softly. "Oh God, David is going to be devastated. He loves both these babies so much." I waited for her to compose herself before asking the difficult question. "Sarah, can you think of any situation where you might have been with another man around the time of conception?" Sarah was quiet for a long time, and I could see her struggling with whether to tell me the truth. Finally, she looked up with an expression of shame and regret. "Dr. Gonzalez, what I am about to tell you cannot leave this room. If David finds out, it will destroy our marriage and our family." "Sarah, as your doctor, our conversation is confidential," I assured her. "But you need to understand that David has a right to know the truth about his children." Sarah took a shaky breath and began to tell me what had really happened during the time she conceived. "David and I had been trying to get pregnant for 4 years, she began. "We had gone through multiple rounds of fertility treatments, and I was becoming desperate. The emotional stress was putting strain on our marriage, and we were starting to fight about whether to continue trying or consider adoption." She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "About 10 months ago, David and I had a huge fight about the fertility treatments. He wanted to take a break from trying to get pregnant, but I was terrified that if we stopped, we would never have children." Sarah looked at me with an expression of deep regret. "I was angry and hurt, and I went out with my sister to a bar downtown. I drank too much and I met a man there." "Sarah, you do not have to give me details," I said, trying to make this easier for her. "But I do," she replied. "Because what happened that night was not just a mistake, it was calculated. The man I met was attractive, intelligent, and he looked like he could be the father of beautiful children." This revelation was shocking. Sarah had not just had a random affair. She had deliberately chosen to be with another man in hopes of getting pregnant. "I was ovulating," Sarah continued. "I knew it was my fertile time, and when David and I fought, I convinced myself that if I could get pregnant with someone else, I could pass the baby off as David as, and we could finally have the family we wanted." Sarah broke down crying again. "Dr. Gonzalez, it was the most selfish, horrible thing I have ever done. But I was so desperate to have a baby, and I thought David would never have to know." I was struggling to process what Sarah was telling me. She had essentially planned to commit paternity fraud against her own husband. "Sarah, did you see this man again after that night?" "Never," she said firmly. "I do not even know his last name. I got pregnant that month, and when David and I found out it was twins, we were so happy that I pushed what I had done to the back of my mind." "But Sarah, you must have realized there was a possibility that one of the babies might not be David?" Sarah nodded miserably. "I hoped that if I got pregnant that same month with David, both babies would be his. I knew it was possible for twins to have different fathers, but I thought the chances were so small that it would never happen." I looked at this woman who seemed to genuinely love her husband and children, but who had made a decision that could destroy her entire family. "Sarah, what are you going to do now?" I asked. "I do not know," she replied. "Dr. Gonzalez, David has been taking care of both babies every night, changing diapers, feeding them, reading to them. He loves Ethan as much as he loves Emma. How can I tell him that Ethan is not his son? This was one of the most difficult ethical situations I had ever faced as a doctor. I had a patient who had conceived twins through deception, and now I had to decide whether to keep her secret or encourage her to tell her husband the truth. Sarah, I understand how difficult this is, but David deserves to know the truth, I said. He has the right to make informed decisions about his family. Sarah looked at me desperately. But what if telling him destroys our marriage? What if he cannot love Ethan the same way once he knows? What if he wants to find Ethan's real father? These were all valid concerns, but they did not change the fact that David was unknowingly raising another man's child. Sarah, these are difficult questions, but hiding the truth is not fair to David or to the children, I replied. Eventually, the truth has a way of coming out, and it will be much worse if David discovers this years from now. Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, clearly wrestling with what to do next. Dr. Gonzalez, she finally said, if I tell David the truth, will you help us figure out how to handle this situation? We are going to need counseling, legal advice, and medical guidance about what this means for the children. Of course, I replied. Sarah, whatever happens, my priority is the health and well-being of Emma and Ethan. They are innocent in all of this. Sarah nodded and took a deep breath. I need to go home and tell my husband that I cheated on him and that one of our newborn babies is not his son. As Sarah prepared to leave my office, I realized that the most difficult part of the story was still to come. The twins having different fathers was shocking, but the real tragedy was what this revelation would do to a family that had seemed so perfect just days earlier. Sarah asked me to be present when she told David the truth about the twins' paternity. She felt that having a medical professional there might help him understand the situation and provide immediate support if he needed it. We arranged to meet at my office the following evening after David finished work. When he arrived, he looked happy and exhausted in the way that all new fathers do. Dr. Gonzalez, Sarah, David said as he entered my office, is everything all right with the babies? Sarah said you needed to discuss something important about their test results. I could see Sarah struggling to find the words to begin this conversation. David sat down next to her, reached for her hand, and looked at both of us with growing concern. David, Sarah began, her voice shaking. The babies are healthy, but the genetic tests revealed something that I need to tell you about. What is it? David asked, looking between Sarah and me. Sarah took a deep breath and looked directly at her husband. David, Emma is your biological daughter, but Ethan has a different biological father. David stared at Sarah for several seconds, as if he had not understood what she said. Then his expression slowly changed from confusion to shock to hurt. What do you mean? A different father? David asked quietly. I mean that while I was pregnant with both babies, Emma is your daughter and Ethan is the son of another man, Sarah explained, tears streaming down her face. David let go of Sarah's hand and leaned back in his chair. Sarah, that is medically impossible. You were pregnant with twins. How can they have different fathers? I stepped in to explain the medical reality. David, it is called heteropaternal superfecundation. It is rare, but it happens when a woman releases multiple eggs during ovulation and has intercourse with different partners within a few days of each other. David looked at me, then back at Sarah, as the full implication of what I was saying became clear to him. Sarah, David said, his voice becoming harder. Are you telling me that you were with another man while we were trying to get pregnant? Sarah could barely speak through her tears. David, I'm so sorry. It was one night and I was angry and desperate, and I made a terrible mistake. David stood up abruptly and began pacing around my office. A mistake? Sarah, we have been trying to have children for 4 years. We have been through fertility treatments, counseling, everything, and you were sleeping with someone else. It was not like that, Sarah protested. It was one night and I was drunk, and I was so hurt after our fight about taking a break from trying to get pregnant. David stopped pacing and looked at his wife with an expression I had never seen before. A mixture of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak. Sarah, do you realize what you have done? David said, his voice rising. I have been getting up every night to take care of these babies. I have been changing Ethan's diapers, feeding him, singing to him, and he is not even my son. David, please, Sarah begged. You love Ethan. You have been such an amazing father to both of them. I love him because I thought he was my son, David shouted. I love him because I thought we created him together. I intervened before the conversation became even more heated. David, Sarah, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we need to think about what is best for the children. David turned to me with tears in his eyes. Dr. Gonzalez, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to look at Ethan and not think about the fact that my wife was with another man? David, I said gently, Ethan is still the same baby you have been caring for. His paternity does not change who he is or the bond you have already formed with him. But David was not ready to hear that. Dr. Gonzalez, every time I look at Ethan, I am going to be reminded that Sarah betrayed me. How am I supposed to love this child the same way I love Emma? Sarah was crying uncontrollably now. David, please do not punish Ethan for what I did. He is innocent, and he needs both of us. David sat back down, put his head in his hands, and was quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up, his expression was cold. Sarah, I need to know everything, he said. Who is this man? Where did you meet him? Are you going to tell him he has a son? Sarah shook her head. David, I do not even know his last name. It was a stranger I met at a bar. I will never see him again. So Ethan will never know his real father? David asked. You are his real father, Sarah insisted. You are the one who wanted him, who took care of me during the pregnancy, who held him when he was born. But David was not convinced. Sarah, I am his stepfather at best. His real father is some random guy you picked up in a bar. The pain in David's voice was heartbreaking. This man had waited years to become a father, and now he was learning that one of his children was not biologically his. David, I said, you have some difficult decisions to make, but you do not have to make them right now. You need time to process this information. David looked at me with exhaustion. Dr. Gonzalez, what would you do if you were in my position? I had been dreading this question. David, I cannot tell you what to do, but I can tell you that the children need stability and love, regardless of their paternity. David stood up again and looked at Sarah. I cannot go home tonight. I cannot look at Ethan right now and pretend everything is normal. Sarah panicked. David, where are you going to go? The babies need you. The babies need you, David corrected. Ethan does not need me. He never did. As David prepared to leave my office, I realized that Sarah's deception had not just revealed a medical anomaly. It had destroyed a marriage and threatened the well-being of two innocent children. The twins having different fathers was shocking. But David's reaction to learning the truth was going to determine what kind of life Emma and Ethan would have. David left my office that night, and Sarah went home alone to take care of newborn twins while processing the collapse of her marriage. Over the next 2 weeks, I stayed in close contact with Sarah to monitor the baby's health, but it was clear that the emotional trauma was taking its toll on the entire family. Dr. Gonzalez, Sarah said during a follow-up appointment. David has been staying at his brother's house. He comes to see Emma every few days, but he will not even look at Ethan. This was heartbreaking to witness. Emma and Ethan were just 2 weeks old, and already one of them was being treated differently by the man who should have been his father. How are you managing with 2 newborns on your own? I asked. I am not sleeping, I am barely eating, and I am struggling to breastfeed because of the stress, Sarah admitted. My mother has been helping, but she keeps asking me what happened between David and me. Sarah had not told her family or friends the real reason for David's sudden absence. As far as they knew, David was just having a difficult time adjusting to fatherhood. Sarah, have you and David discussed what happens next? I asked. Sarah began crying. Dr. Gonzalez, David wants a divorce. He says he cannot forgive me for lying to him, and he cannot pretend to love Ethan the same way he loves Emma. This was the outcome I had feared. David's pain and anger were understandable, but his rejection of Ethan was going to have long-term consequences for both children. What about custody arrangements? I asked. David wants full custody of Emma and no responsibility for Ethan, Sarah replied. He says he will pay child support for Emma but not for Ethan, since Ethan is not his child. I was shocked by David's position. While legally he had no obligation to support Ethan, morally the situation was more complex. Sarah, you need to consider what is best for both children, I said. Growing up in the same house but being treated differently by their father figure will be traumatic for both Emma and Ethan. I know, Sarah said desperately. But I do not know how to fix this. David will not even consider family counseling. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call from David asking to meet with me privately. When he came to my office, he looked like he had not slept in weeks. Dr. Gonzalez, David said, I need to ask you something about the baby's medical needs. Of course, David. What do you want to know? If Emma and Ethan grow up together, will they need to know that they have different fathers for medical reasons? He asked. This was an important question. David, there could be situations where knowing their genetic background would be medically relevant, especially if either child develops genetic conditions or needs organ transplants. David nodded thoughtfully. And what happens when they get older and start asking questions about why they look so different? Children are very observant, I replied. Emma and Ethan will probably notice their physical differences and ask questions about their parentage. David was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he looked at me with an expression of resignation. Dr. Gonzalez, I have been thinking about what you said about the children needing stability. Even though Ethan is not my biological son, he is Emma's twin brother. That is true, I agreed. They will have a special bond that should not be disrupted. I keep thinking about what it would be like for Emma to grow up knowing that I abandoned her twin brother, David continued. What kind of message does that send to her about family and loyalty? I could see that David was struggling with competing emotions, his anger at Sarah as betrayal versus his love for the children, and his sense of moral responsibility. David, what are you thinking? I am thinking that maybe I need to try to forgive Sarah and figure out how to be a father to both children, he said. Not because I owe anything to Ethan's biological father, but because Emma deserves to grow up with her brother. This was a significant shift in David's perspective, and I was hopeful that it might lead to a better outcome for everyone. David, have you talked to Sarah about this? Not yet, he replied. But Dr. Gonzalez, I need to know something honestly. Do you think Sarah truly loves me, or was our whole marriage based on her desire to have children? This was a question I could not answer definitively, but I could share my observations. David, from what I witnessed during Sarah's pregnancy, she seemed genuinely devoted to you. Her decision to cheat was wrong, but it appeared to come from desperation rather than lack of love. David considered this. Dr. Gonzalez, if I decide to try to save my marriage and be a father to both children, how do I deal with knowing that Ethan is not mine biologically? David, parenting is about more than genetics, I replied. Every day, you will have opportunities to build a relationship with Ethan based on care, commitment, and love rather than DNA. David stood up to leave but turned back with one final question. Dr. Gonzalez, do you think I am being foolish to consider taking back a wife who lied to me and raising another man's child? I thought carefully before answering. David, I think you are being a man who is trying to do what is best for two innocent children who need a father. Whether that is foolish or noble depends on your perspective. After David left, I realized that this case had taught me something important about families. Biology creates relationships, but love and commitment sustain them. The twins having different fathers was medically interesting, but the real story was about whether David could find a way to love and forgive despite betrayal and disappointment. 6 months after Emma and Ethan were born, I had a follow-up appointment with the family for the baby's routine checkups. I was not sure what to expect, given the turmoil that had surrounded their early weeks of life. When Sarah arrived at my office, she was accompanied by David, and both babies appeared healthy and well cared for. More importantly, I observed David interacting naturally with both Emma and Ethan, holding them, talking to them, and showing equal attention to both children. Dr. Gonzalez, Sarah said as we completed the baby's examinations, I wanted to thank you for everything you did to help us through the most difficult time in our lives. David added, Dr. Gonzalez, your guidance helped me realize that being a father is about more than genetics. I was relieved. to see that this family had apparently found a way to overcome the crisis that had threatened to destroy them. "How are things going at home?" I asked. Sarah and David looked at each other before Sarah answered. "It has not been easy, but we are in counseling together, and we are working on rebuilding trust," David continued. "I realized that my anger at Sarah was hurting the children, and that was not fair to Emma or Ethan. They deserve better from me. I could see that both Sarah and David had matured significantly through this experience. The pain of betrayal and the challenge of forgiveness had tested their relationship, but they seemed committed to making their family work. "Have you decided what you will tell the children when they are older?" I asked. David answered this question. "We have decided to be honest with them when they are old enough to understand. Emma and Ethan deserve to know the truth about their parentage, but we want to present it in a way that emphasizes that they are both wanted and loved." Sarah added, "We also want them to understand that families are built on love and commitment, not just genetics." As I watched David play with Ethan, speaking to him in the same gentle, loving tone he used with Emma, I realized that this man had made a remarkable choice. He had decided to love a child who was not biologically his because it was the right thing to do for his family. "Dr. Gonzalez," David said, "I want you to know that I consider myself Ethan's father in every way that matters. I am the one who gets up with him at night, teaches him to walk, and will be there for every milestone in his life." Sarah began crying happy tears. "David has been incredible. He loves both children equally, and he has forgiven me for the mistake I made." I asked the question that had been on my mind since this ordeal began. "David, was forgiveness difficult?" David thought for a moment. "Dr. Gonzalez, forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a daily choice. Every day I choose to focus on the family we have, rather than the betrayal that brought us here." As the appointment concluded, David handed me a photograph of the family: Sarah, David, Emma, and Ethan, all smiling together. "Dr. Gonzalez, this is our family," David said. "Not the family we planned, but the family we choose to be." Several years later, I received Christmas cards from the Williams family showing Emma and Ethan growing up as happy, healthy children with parents who clearly adored them. In the most recent photo, the twins were 4 years old, and while they still looked quite different from each other, they were obviously close siblings. Sarah included a note in the Christmas card. "Dr. Gonzalez, thank you for helping us navigate the most difficult time in our lives. Emma and Ethan are thriving, and David is the most wonderful father to both of them. We learned that love is a choice, and we choose love every day. This case taught me that families are not always created in the ways we expect, and that the strongest bonds are often forged through challenges rather than easy circumstances." The twins having different fathers was medically rare, but David's decision to love both children equally was an extraordinary example of what it means to be a true father. Sarah's infidelity could have destroyed their family, but instead it became the foundation for a deeper understanding of love, forgiveness, and commitment. Emma and Ethan will grow up knowing that their father chose to love them not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that are built through choice rather than genetics. David Williams chose to be Ethan's father every single day, and that choice made their family stronger than biology ever could have. The strangest part of this story was not that the twins had different fathers. It was that their family became more united and loving because of the crisis that could have torn them apart.